The wind carried the smell of dust, sweat, and fear across the town of White Rock on the morning they decided she would hang. Her wrists were tied so tightly behind her back, the rope had carved marks into her skin, and her knees trembled as the sheriff dragged her toward the wooden platform in the town square. Her name was Clara Dane, 22 years old, alone, accused of stealing a horse that wasn't hers, a crime punishable by death in that brutal corner of the West. She had tried to explain, tried to beg, tried to make them listen, but no one cared. No one listened to a girl with no family, no land, no husband, and no power. Sheriff Boone, a man who believed mercy made a town weak, shoved her forward. "Set her up," he commanded, and his deputies pulled her up the steps. The noose swayed in the wind, creaking like it had been waiting just for her. Clara stared at it through the haze of terror, feeling her breath stiffen in her throat. A small crowd had gathered, mostly men who came for the spectacle. Some were laughing, some were whispering, some were shaking their heads like she deserved every bit of what was coming. Somewhere in that crowd, a woman clutched her child's hand tightly, as if shielding her from a nightmare made real. Clara closed her eyes. She had no one left in the world, no one to speak for her, no one to save her. And then, just as the sheriff grabbed the rope, a deep voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. "Stop!" The word echoed. Some turned, others frowned. The sheriff looked over his shoulder with annoyance. A man was walking through the crowd. Tall, broad-shouldered, dust clinging to his boots, hat tilted low. His jaw was shadowed by days without shaving, and his coat, long, dark, weather-worn, moved with the wind like something living. Everyone knew him. Everyone stepped aside for him. Wyatt Callahan, the widowed cowboy, the man who once ran one of the biggest ranches in the territory before tragedy hollowed out his life. His wife had died 3 winters ago, and since then he had spoken little, smiled never, and lived like a ghost among the living. "What do you want, Callahan?" Sheriff Boone asked, irritated. Wyatt climbed the steps slowly, his boots thudding against the wood. His gaze landed on Clara, and in those dark, steady eyes she saw something she hadn't seen from anyone since her mother died: kindness. "I'll take her place," Wyatt said. The entire square fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Clara felt her whole body go numb. The sheriff blinked. "You'll what?" "You heard me," Wyatt replied. "She goes free, I hang instead." Boone scoffed. "You can't be serious, she's guilty." Wyatt stepped between Clara and the noose, blocking her from the sheriff. "And I'm telling you she's innocent." "And who made you judge?" the sheriff barked. Wyatt turned fully toward him. "A man who knows what a lie looks like," he said. "A man who knows desperation. A man who's seen what fear makes people do." The crowd whispered, some backed up, others craned their necks to see. Boone narrowed his eyes. "This is the law, Callahan. A crime was committed, a punishment is due." "Then take me," Wyatt said calmly. "If it satisfies whatever you call justice, take me instead." Clara shook her head violently. "No, no, please don't," she cried through cracked lips. "I didn't ask for this." Wyatt didn't look at her, but his voice softened. "You didn't have to ask." Boone slammed his hat down. "You think you can just replace her? This isn't a game, Callahan. This is a hanging." "And she didn't steal that horse," Wyatt said, his voice turning dangerous. "Your deputy's son did." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Boone's face turned purple. "Watch your mouth." "I saw him riding it toward the ridge road. Brown stallion, white patch over the eye." Wyatt folded his arms. "You want the truth, go ask him, but we both know you won't." Boone hesitated for a moment, long enough for guilt to show on his face, but then he growled. "She was found with the horse." "Because it was tied at the river where she was sleeping," Wyatt snapped. "Anyone could have planted it there, anyone trying to hide their own tracks." The sheriff's deputies shifted, suddenly uneasy. Wyatt stepped closer to Boone until they were nearly chest to chest. "You want someone to pay? Fine, I'll pay." Boone stared at him. The crowd watched like their lives depended on the outcome. Finally, Boone's expression twisted into a cruel smile. If that's truly what you want, then so be it. He shoved Wyatt toward the rope. Clara screamed. "No, don't do this. I didn't steal anything," she cried, struggling against her bonds. "I don't even know you. Don't die for me." Wyatt paused. He turned his head slightly, his voice quiet but firm. "You don't need to know someone to recognize a soul worth saving." Her eyes filled with tears. She had never heard words that gentle directed at her, not once in her life. Boone grabbed the rope and looped it around Wyatt's neck. "Last chance," he sneered. "Say you want to walk away." Wyatt closed his eyes briefly. He saw his wife's face. He saw the life he couldn't save, the mistakes he couldn't undo, the nights he'd prayed for a chance to do one thing, just one thing, right. Then he opened his eyes and said, "Do it." The crowd held its breath. But before the lever could be pulled, a gunshot cracked through the air. Boone froze, deputies scrambled, women screamed, men ducked. A small group of riders thundered into the square, led by Marshal Grant, the federal officer who outranked every lawman in 5 counties. "Boone," the marshal shouted as he dismounted, "step away from him." Boone cursed, "What is this?" Grant held up a piece of paper, signed statements, witnesses, all confirming that your deputy's son stole the horse. Clara Dane is innocent. Clara collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Grant pointed at Boone. "And you tried to hang her to protect your deputy's worthless boy. You're done." Boone's deputies backed away from him immediately. Grant cut the rope from Wyatt's neck himself. "Callahan, you almost died today for a stranger's life." Wyatt shrugged faintly. "It wouldn't have been the worst thing." Clara, trembling, whispered, Why did you do that for me?" Wyatt finally turned fully toward her. "Because no one did it for my wife," he said quietly, "and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that." She wept harder, not from fear, not from pain, from something she hadn't felt in years: safety. Grant nodded at Wyatt. "You saved an innocent woman today. The law owes you." But Wyatt shook his head. "I don't want anything." Yet as he walked Clara down the steps, untying her wrists with his own hands, he felt something unfamiliar, something he thought had died in him with his wife. "Hope." Clara looked up at him, wiping her tears with the back of her shaking hand. "You gave me my life back," she whispered. Wyatt swallowed. "Maybe you just gave me mine too." They walked away from the gallows together, 2 broken souls who, by some miracle, had been given another chance. And neither of them knew it yet, but from that moment on, they would never walk alone again.